Masechet Sanhedrin, Daf Ayin Vav. On the previous couple of dapim, we saw a gezerah shava, in fact, a double gezerah shava, between this pasuk here, "Et isha bita lo tegalet bat bena ve'et bat bita." This prohibits a man to be with his wife's daughter or granddaughters, and it says the word henna, and it also says the word zima. And so this is a linking pasuk that connects also with this pasuk here. Ervat bat bincha or bat bitecha lo tegel ervatan ki ervatecha henna, says the word henna here. And this is talking about a man's own, and says granddaughters, either his daughter's daughter or his son's daughter or daughter's daughter. Curiously, this pasuk does not say his own daughter. Maybe you'll say, well, it's obvious if he's prohibited to his granddaughter, then certainly his daughter. But it doesn't say so. So that Gemara is going to come to that in a few minutes. But for now, we saw that it says the word henna here as well. And from this gezerah shavav, henna here, when it's talking about a man's granddaughters, his own family, we make a gezerah shava to the other pasuk that has henna and talks about a woman's family, her granddaughters, that the husband, her husband is prohibited too. And from this gezerah shava, we can learn and try to learn several connections between something that's prohibited on his side or not on her side, or on her side but not on his side. Furthermore, from Zima, we learn that the punishment for these relationships, man and his daughter and his wife's daughter and so on, is the punishment of serefa. Okay, so now we come to our Gemara that says, Imahu kalato asura, afi kalata asura. We know the Torah says explicitly that a man is prohibited to his daughter-in-law, his son's wife. That is for sure. And the punishment for that is sikila. Now, what about his wife's daughter-in-law? Let's say from a previous marriage, she had a son, and that son married someone. She has a daughter-in-law. Is that prohibited to her husband, to this man? So this is his wife's daughter-in-law. It's not his daughter-in-law, but his wife's daughter-in-law. The Torah does not say anything about that. So perhaps we can say a gezerah shava, henna, henna. Just like we know the Torah says a man's daughter-in-law is prohibited. Let's use henna, henna. Whatever is prohibited to him is also going to be prohibited to her. Whatever's prohibited on his side of the family will be prohibited to him on her side of the family, and that way his wife's daughter-in-law also will be prohibited. Is that a good gezerah shava? Amar Abaye, Amar Kera, Eshet bincha hi mishum eshet bincha, ata mechayavo v'ata mechayavo mishum eshet bena. Abaye says no, it's not good, because here's the pasuk from where we learn his daughter-in-law, Ervat kalatecha lo tegale, eshet bincha hi. There's an extra clause that limits it and says only his daughter-in-law is prohibited and not her daughter-in-law. And so, no, this section of the pasuk will cancel out the possible derivation from that gezerah shava. Okay, that's Abaye. Rava Amar ben leman damar dun mineh mina ben leman damar dun mina ve'okeh b'atira la atya. Rava says, I agree that this is not a good gezerah shava, but for a different reason, not because of these words, but rather because there's something wrong with it. And it doesn't matter whether you follow the opinion that says that when you make a gezerah shava, you can copy and paste the prohibition, and also the context of the source. Whatever the punishment was in the source, you paste that also to the destination. Whether you follow that opinion, that's don mina umina, the law itself, the prohibition and the capital punishment, also you copy and paste. Or whether you follow the other opinion that says you copy and paste, but you paste according to the formatting of the destination, meaning you copy only the prohibition, but the type of capital punishment you learn from the context of the destination. Either way, la'atya, we cannot bring this gezerah shava. And he explains, Lama damar dun mina umina, mahu kalato asura, afi nami kalata asura. So if you're going to learn the entire context, so the gezerah shava would be as follows. Just like he is prohibited to his daughter-in-law, so too he is prohibited to his wife's daughter-in-law. That's the copy and paste of the prohibition. That's just the don mina. And then the umina and the context, umina, mahu beskila, after And just like if a man sins with his daughter-in-law, he gets sikila, so too will apply the same punishment to his wife's daughter-in-law and sikila. This methodology would apply the prohibition and the type of punishment. Well, now let's see if this works. There's a problem. According to the opinion that says sikila is more stringent than serefa. That's the standard opinion of the majority. Well, then we can challenge this gezerah shava, because a man, if he's with his mother, then he gets sikila. So you see, that's very stringent. So you can't learn from the man's side of the family, where we apply very stringent laws, to her, tomar behi she'ima bisrefa, because if a man is with his wife's mother, then he also gets capital punishment, but a lower level, only serefa. And since the laws for his wife's family is less stringent than for his own family, so maybe he's only prohibited to his own daughter-in-law, but for his wife's daughter-in-law, then that's more lenient. And so we cannot assume that just because his daughter-in-law is prohibited, that his wife's daughter-in-law is also prohibited. It's a more lenient context. That's challenge number one. Ve'od bitaha bisrefa ve'chalataha biskila. And furthermore, does it make sense that his wife's daughter, if a man is with his wife's daughter, he gets serefa, which is only the second worst type of capital punishment. But if he's with his wife's daughter-in-law, he should get sikila, which is the worst punishment. Certainly, a wife's daughter is a closer relation than his wife's daughter-in-law. So it doesn't make sense that his wife's daughter will get serefa, and then his wife's daughter-in-law, which was farther away, will get a worse punishment of sikila. That just doesn't make sense. But this challenge we refute, because because we know the laws for his side of the family. If a man sins with his own daughter, he gets serefa. With his daughter-in-law, sikila. That's the rule. Everybody agrees to that. And, well, it goes against logic. Isn't his daughter closer to him than his daughter-in-law? Yeah, it's true, but that's the Torah law. So if that's true on his side, certainly it can be true on her side as well. So that is not a problem. Ela mahu lo chalakta bo ben imo lechalato, afi lo tachalok ba ben ima lechalata. Rather, the second problem we'll have, according to this opinion, is regarding the man's relatives, we make no distinction between his mother and his daughter-in-law. Both are liable to stoning. So too on her side, then we should not make a distinction between his wife's mother and the daughter-in-law. But we do make a distinction because the wife's mother is serefa, that's the pasuk that we talked about yesterday, and his daughter-in-law, according to this derivation, we're applying sikila. But now that's different. The mother is serefa, the daughter-in-law is sikila. That's not the same. But for on the man's side, it's both sikila, it's the same. And so the gezerah shava doesn't work because they're not equal. So we reject that opinion. And the other opinion that says serefa is more stringent than sikila. So the first question we had before is not a problem, because since serefa is more stringent, so that means that a person, his own mother is sikila, his wife's mother is serefa. So you see, his wife's family is more stringent. So then, if a man is prohibited to his own daughter-in-law on his side of the family, all the more so, he'll be prohibited to his wife's daughter-in-law. So that is not a problem. But we will still have this question, that it should be the same. And according to this derivation also, it's the same derivation. It doesn't matter which one is more lenient or less lenient. The point is that on his side, it's the same, sikila for his mother and daughter-in-law. So it should be the same punishment on his wife's side, and it's not the same because his mother-in-law is serefa and his daughter-in-law in this derivation is sikila. So that doesn't work. Now let's try the other opinion, the other methodology. This opinion says we copy and paste only the fact that it's prohibited, not the type of capital punishment. Rather, the type of capital punishment, we use the local formatting of the destination, and we see what the context is there. So according to that, here is how the gezerah shava would work. Mahu kalato asura, afi kalata asura. This is the same. Just like we know for the man, his daughter-in-law is prohibited. We use the gezerah shava, henna, to say that's true for the wife's side. that his wife's daughter-in-law is prohibited. Good. And we'll learn the type of capital punishment from the destination. Regarding the man, his own daughter-in-law, that was sikila. Okay, but that's a separate law. Now let's look at her. On her side, it should be sirefa because his wife's mother is prohibited to him on the penalty of sirefa. So too, his wife's daughter-in-law, it would make sense, it would also be sirefa. And so you see now it's going to be the same punishment, sirefa, sirefa. So that would be a good thing. We won't have that question. So let's see. Lemanda mar sikila chamura ika lemifrach malehu sheken imo biskila tomar behi she'ima bisrefa. If you follow the majority opinion that sikila is the worst type of capital punishment, then we can reject this, because if regarding the man, he's prohibited to his wife but sikila. So the man's side is very, very stringent. So can we apply a prohibition on his side, his daughter-in-law, to his wife's side? After all, his wife's mother is only sirefa, so that his wife's side generally is less stringent. So just because something is prohibited to a man on his side doesn't mean necessarily it's prohibited to him. So on her side, maybe the prohibition on his daughter-in-law does not apply to his wife's daughter-in-law. And so that's one problem. And furthermore, just like on the man's side, we make a distinction between his daughter, which is sirefa, and his daughter-in-law, which is sikila, so too on his wife's side, we should make a distinction between his wife's daughter, which is sirefa, and his wife's daughter-in-law, which is sirefa. According to this derivation, we're learning sirefa and sirefa, but now it's the same. So actually this is bad. We want them to be different because the daughter and daughter-in-law are different on his side, so they should be different on her side also. And now they're the same. So these gezerah shava, the cases aren't parallel because you need the whole context to be parallel. And if you say that sirefa is the worst punishment, well, you won't have the first problem because sirefa is worse. So if a man is prohibited to his mother with sikila, he's prohibited to his wife's mother in sirefa, so his wife's family is even more stringent. Therefore, if he's prohibited to his own daughter-in-law, certainly is prohibited to his wife's daughter-in-law. So that won't be a challenge. But from this challenge, we can't get out of, and therefore we don't have a gezerah shava, because according to this last challenge, if on his side, his daughter and his daughter-in-law are different punishments, but according to this, on her side, it's the same punishment, and therefore this entire gezerah shava cannot help us to learn a prohibition and punishment for his wife's daughter-in-law. The Gemara next turns to the prohibition of a man with his own daughter. As we pointed out earlier, the pasuk says that a man is not allowed to be with his granddaughters, either son's daughter or daughter's daughter, but it doesn't explicitly say anything about his own daughter. Now, if it's his wife's daughter, meaning if he's married and has a daughter with his wife, then we know that prohibition because we already spoke about his wife's daughter. So if he's married, then his own daughter will be included under his wife's daughter, so that prohibition is already known. But what is not known is bito me'anusato minayin. What about a daughter that he has out of wedlock? The Gemara says me'anusato, from a woman he raped. It could be rape or it could be not. The point is that if he has a daughter out of wedlock, then that daughter is not his wife's daughter because he's not married, but it is his daughter, and the pasuk only says a man's granddaughter, not his daughter. So we need a source for a man being with his own daughter who he had out of wedlock. Ha'amad Abaye kavachomer al bat bito anush al bito lo kol sheken. So we're going to see three answers to this. The first one is Abaye says, it's a kavachomer. If a person gets punished for his own granddaughters, then all the more so for his own daughter. That makes sense. We're focusing here on the punishment. We're going to come in a second to the azhara, to the warning, to how we know there's a prohibition in the first place, and we're going to see Abaye will learn it from the same place. Then we ask, V'chi min hadin giluye milata be'almahu. Hold on, we have a rule that you cannot give a punishment based on a kal vachomer. As strong as a kal vachomer is, who knows? You can always argue a different type of kal vachomer, argue the other way. And so how can we give a person punishment based on a kal vachomer? And the answer, Abaye would say here, is that this kal vachomer is stronger than a regular kal vachomer. It's just disclosing the matter. It's going to just obvious. If you see granddaughter is going to be capital punishment, then all the more so daughter. It's included. In because in fact it's on the way. His granddaughter is only related to him because through his daughter. So this is more than a kal vachomer. It's just revealing what the matter has to be. So that is the first derivation of Abaye. Rava Amar li Rabbi Yitzchak bar Abdimi, atya henna, atya zima. Rava says that Rav Yitzchak bar Abdimi told him, we can use the Gezer HaShavah that we had before. Henna, we learn his relatives and her relatives the same. So just like regarding a man's wife, it says daughter and granddaughters, so too we could apply henna, it says in both contexts regarding his side. Although it only says granddaughters, we can use the Gezer HaShavah to say daughter also is prohibited, and it would be the same capital punishment of serefa. How do you know serefa? That's from zima, because it says zima regarding a man's mother-in-law, and there it says serefa. So too, zima of his wife's daughter and granddaughters is zima, and since we have henna, that's true also for a man and his daughter, or his daughter, granddaughters, all will be serefa. Good. So Rava learns it from a Gezer HaShavah. Third derivation, Taneh Abu de Rabbi Abin. לפי שלא למדנו לביתו מאנוסתו, הוסרח הכתוב לומר בת איש כהן. Because the pasuk doesn't say explicitly his daughter out of wedlock, therefore the pasuk regarding a bat kohen says bat ish kohen ki techel liznot, she gets serefa, a bat kohen who commits adultery. But the pasuk could have said ubat kohen. I would have known, the daughter of a kohen. Why does it have to say ubat ish kohen? The ish comes to include a regular case of someone who's not a kohen, anyone who has a daughter and he violates his own daughter. And you can read it like this: Obat ish, so say ish, ki techel liznot et aviha. You move the comma over. Et aviha hi mechalelet is the normal way to read it. She defiles her father, but you can read it et aviha hi mechalelet. All right, if she becomes defiled with her father, so that means the father is doing the act. So that is a prohibition, and it says that they will get killed by fire, by serefa. So this is a good derivation. Now we ask about this. Ima bat kohen hi bisrefa, ve'en ba'ala bisrefa, pito me'anusato bisrefa, ve'en ba'ala bisrefa. Hold on. If you're going to learn from this pasuk, then don't you have to learn the same type of capital punishments for him and for her? Regarding a bat kohen who commits adultery, she gets serefa, but the adulterer, he gets chenek, the regular punishment for any adultery. We don't give him serefa also. He's not a bat kohen. So should we say here also that now they're applying to the word ish, that anybody's daughter, if someone sins with his own daughter, that out of wedlock, so you'll say she's serefa because that's what the pasuk says, and he won't be serefa. What is he going to get? Something else? But we know that the law has to be that he should also get serefa, because that's what it is with everything else. If he's with his wife's daughter, she and he gets serefa. With his mother-in-law, both get serefa. But if you derive it from here, then it would make more sense to say, just like a bat kohen, the adulterer gets chenek, maybe in this case also, he would not get serefa, but chenek or something else. So how do we answer that? Amar Abaye Amar Kera, et aviha hi mechalelet, mi shemechalelet et aviha, yaseta zo she'aviha mechalelaha. Abaye says, I can answer this question. Interestingly, Abaye had his own derivation for this law that was different from this baraita from the father of Rabbi Abin. Nevertheless, Abaye is coming to defend this one, and he says, the pasuk says, she defiles her father, which means talking about a bat kohen who has adultery, because she had adultery with another man, so that brings shame to her father, who is a kohen. So we learned that we only apply the idea that she gets serefa and the adulterer gets chenek in a case where she is defiling her father. But in a case where her father is defiling her because the father is sleeping with his own daughter, well, in that case, it's different. It's not going to be the parallel punishments, but rather both the father and the daughter, assuming she's not a minor, will get serefa. Okay, so Abaye says, right, the pasuk says, we can learn from these words, that it's only she gets serefa and he gets chenek when she is the one doing adultery and bringing shame to the father because she's adulterating with someone else. But if the father is the one that's bringing shame to her, then the capital punishment is not going to be the same as in that case, but rather both serefa. Rava Amar Bishla Mahatam Apikte Medina dina de bat kohen, ve'okimta dina de bat Yisrael. Rava has another way to defend this braita and to say that they're both serefa. Does it make sense in the context of the pasuk of a bat kohen that we remove him from the adulterer, from the daughter of bat kohen, because he's not a bat kohen? So what's the difference who he commits adultery with? So what is he? He's an adulterer. So we'll treat him the same as if he committed adultery with a bat kohen, with a bat Yisrael. He gets chenik no matter what. She has a special status of a bat kohen, so she gets serefa and she gets this special punishment. That's true there. Hacha dina deman mokmat le. But in this case, we have the father. The father sins with his daughter. But this is not adultery because the daughter isn't married, so you can't call it adultery. So then what other punishment are you going to give the father? Adina de pinuya mokmetla. You're going to give him a punishment for being with a single woman? There is no capital punishment for being with a single woman. So then what punishment are you going to give her? So there is no other punishment that would be appropriate for him. Rather, it must be serefa. Give him the same as what you would give her. So that's the difference when regarding adultery. Okay, we have a fallback. Adultery, we have a basic punishment for adultery that the adulterer would deserve. But here, there's nothing else that we can apply for the father. This prohibition. So this prohibition is serefa. Good. Now that we know the punishment is serefa for a man with his daughter, what about the warning? How do we know the basic prohibition before the punishment? For Abaye and Rava, the first two answers that we gave before, wherever you learn the punishment from, you can also learn the prohibition from, whether it's from a gezerah shava, like Rava said, or Abaye said, kal vachomer, gilui milta, the same gezerah shava, you learn a punishment, you can also bring over the prohibition from the source to the destination. So that's fine. But here, according to the Baraita of the father of Rabbi Avin that we learned from about Ish Kohen, that only gives the punishment. Where is the derivation of the prohibition? Amar Rabbi Ila, Amar Kera, al techalel et bitecha lehaznota, pasuk in Parashat Kedoshim, Vayikra Yutet, do not profane your daughter by causing her to act in a licentious way. Lehaznota, and if he sins with his daughter, that's certainly lehaznota. Matkif la Rabbi Yaakov achud Rav Acha bar Yaakov. But we have a challenge against this. Hai al techalel bitecha lehaznota lahachihu da'ata. Wait, this pasuk, does it come to teach us this prohibition of a father and daughter? We already used this pasuk for something else. Hai mi ba'ale lechetanya. Hai al techalel bitecha lehaznota. Yachol bekohen hamesi et bito lelevi v'Yisrael katu medaber. Tamad lomar lehaznota. Bechilul shebiznuta katu medaber. V'mosed et bito shelo l'shem ishut. This Midrash Halacha says that we need this pasuk. Do not profane your daughter by causing her to act licentiously. What does that mean? Is it about a kohen who marries his daughter off to a Levin or Yisrael, right? And that would be considered profaning his daughter. That this would be there were opinions back in ancient times that a kohen, a family, should marry another kohen family only, and the kohen should not marry a non-kohen family. And if he does so, he's profaning this holy seed. There were such opinions, but this Gemara rejects that. It says no, lehaznota. And so, although it might not be so dignified to marry off a bat kohen just to a lowly Yisrael or even a Levi, but that's not called zinut. So maybe it's chilul in the sense that it's not holy, but it's not zinut. So therefore, it's not that case, but rather it's a case of a father who gives over his daughter not for the sake of marriage. He allows his daughter to be with another man or other men, and not require that the man marry her. So if he's letting his daughter be promiscuous, that's the prohibition. So since we need this pasuk to talk about that, so we cannot use it for the azhara of a man with his own daughter. So we answer, Im ken lema kera al tachel. The pasuk just to teach that could have said al tachel with one lamed. My al techalel. What's this expanded form of the verb? Shema minat terter. We could learn in fact two things from it. Hi al techalelit b'techalaz nota my abdileh. And now we go back to Abaye and Rava. They already had a source for the punishment and the same source they used for the azhara. So therefore, what do they need the extra lamed for? They can use the al tachel for this derivation that one cannot allow his daughter to be promiscuous, but what are they going to do with the extra lamed? What else are they going to learn from it? That comes to include someone who marries his daughter off to an old man. Since the old man is not going to be able to satisfy her, she is then likely to look for satisfaction elsewhere. And so the man, the father, by marrying his daughter off to an old man, is setting her up for failure and to setting her up for to act licentiously, and therefore this pasuk says that the father should not do that. Kedetanya al techaled b'tichal haznota. Rabbi Eliezer omer zeh mesiet bito lezaken. Rabbi Akiva omer zeh amashhe bito bogeret. And we learn this from a baraita that says, do not profane your daughter by causing her to act licentiously. How is the father doing it? One of two ways. Rabbi Eliezer says this is a man who marries his young daughter off to a very old man. So then, although she shouldn't, she's still not allowed to still be adultery, but you don't put someone in that position where it's going to be so difficult for her. And so otherwise, if he does, it's his fault. The father, Rabbi Akiva, says, this is talking about someone who does not allow his daughter to get married. Let's say he's poor and he can't afford a housekeeper. So his daughter does that, or does all the chores in the house. And so the father doesn't want to let his daughter get married, and he keeps saying no to every guy that comes over, and he says no, because if he marries off his daughter, then she's going to go live with her husband, and then he will be alone, and no one will do his chores. Someone who does that, or for whatever other reason, delays marrying off his daughter for not a good reason. Of course, if they're all lowlives that come over, then it's okay. He has to protect his daughter. But for a bad reason, he just won't let his daughter get married. Then he is setting her up for failure, because eventually she not being married may cause her to act in a zinut manner. Amar Rav Kahana mishum Rabbi Akiva, en lecha ani sheb'Yisrael ella rasha arum vehamashe bito bogeret. Rav Kahana said in the name of Rabbi Akiva, a similar statement or expanded statement of what he said here, that you don't have a poor person in Israel other than a wicked, a conniving wicked person. So this poor person is poor and evil and conniving. We'll see what that's talking about. And also someone who delays marrying off his daughter. Now we ask, Atu hamashe bito bogeret lav rasha arumhu. Why is he saying this as two different categories? It should all be one category, right? Who is someone, the person who delays marrying off his daughter because he's poor and he wants his daughter to do all the chores? Isn't that the same as rasha arum, a conniving wicked person who is, because of his poverty, he's conniving and keeps rejecting his daughter's suitors? So it shall be the same thing. Amar Rabbi Achika amar ezehu ani rasha arum zeh mashe bito bogeret. And so Rabbi says this. In fact, that's what Rabbi Akiva said. What is a case of someone who's poor and evil and conniving? That's someone who will delay marrying off his daughter because he wants his daughter to stay home and take care of the laundry and clean the floors. V'amar Rav Kahana mishum Rabbi Akiva, heve zahir min hayoescha lefi darko. Rav Kahana says in the name of Rabbi Akiva, be careful of taking advice of someone who advises you according to his own interests. One of the applications will be precisely this. If a father says, no, I don't think you should marry this guy, I don't think you should marry that guy, but he's doing it not because of the best interest of his daughter, but because of his own best interest, that he wants a built-in housekeeper, be careful of a person like that. Or any other case when someone's giving you advice and they have self-interest in mind, then you should not take their advice very seriously. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, hamesi et bito lezaken, v'hamesi isha libno katan, v'machazir aveda lenochri, alav ha'katuv omer leman sefot harava et hasemea, lo yoveh Adonai seloach lo. Rav says, as a continuation of what the teaching that we just had here, if a father, marries off his young daughter to an old man, or if a father marries off his young son to a woman, his son is still a child, or if someone returns an item to a non-Jew. About all these three cases, the pasuk says that if someone says, I'm going to go with the stubbornness of my heart and doesn't listen to the Torah law, and he says that the quench shall be added to the thirsty. Many different meanings of that. Even though I do something wrong, I'll be mixed up with I'm the thirsty. I'll be mixed up with those who are quenched, with the tzaddikim who are around me, and I won't get any punishment. No, don't think that. Hashem will not be willing to pardon this person for doing these things. Now, what's so bad about these things? If he, as we said before, if he marries his young daughter to an old man, then the old man will not satisfy his daughter, and she may end up going to a life of zinut. And also, if it's a young boy with a woman, same thing. Then she will not be satisfied with the boy, and that will lead to zinut. And returning an item to a non-Jew, so we're talking about probably a society, number one, where the non-Jewish law was if you finders keepers or finders, you give it to the government and not return it. So why should one have to apply Jewish law to a non-Jew? And maybe it's also a society where non-Jews were stealing from Jews and overtaxing anyway, and therefore there was no even ethical responsibility to return things to the other surrounding nations. So regarding all these, this is a bad thing to do because you're setting things up for a bad consequence. A beautiful romantic statement. Someone who loves his wife as he does himself, and he honors his wife even more than he does himself. And he teaches his sons and his daughters to follow a straight, upright path. And he gets them married off close before they become adults. Alav HaKatuv Omer, V'yadata ki shalom aholecha, ufakadeta navecha v'lo techeta. Regarding that person, it says, then you will know that your ohel, your home, will have shalom. You'll have shalom bayit, the good relationships between a husband and wife, bringing up the kids in a proper way, and there will be not be sin in your house. V'lo techeta. There won't be sin because you're marrying off your kids before they become adults, so they won't have a chance to sin. They'll be happily married with their wives, with their spouses. So this is a good thing to do. This is a challenge to what we just said over here, because according to this statement, it sounds like it's a good idea to marry off your son while he is not, before he's an adult. Whereas here it says, if you marry off a son, then that's not a good thing. So how do we reconcile these? And the answer is, Samuch lepirkan shaneh. If it's close to them becoming an adult, just before, then that's good. And soon, and in just a few days or a few weeks, they'll become an adult. That's good. But marrying off a child when they're a young child, that is not good at all. Tenor banan, ha'ohevet shechenav, v'amkarevet קרוביו, והנושא את בת אחותו, והמלווה סלע לעני בשעתו חכו. עליו הכתוב אומר, אז תקרא והשם יענה. Other good things to do, someone who loves his neighbors, and he brings his relatives close. It's not only that you should, love and bring close strangers, people you're not related to, your neighbors, your family members, keep them close, be kind to them, love them, and someone who marries his niece, right? His brother's daughter. This is permitted in halacha. Although a man marrying an aunt is prohibited, that's erva, but the other way around, a man marrying his niece is permitted. And in fact, here it's encouraged because you're taking care of family. Why should a person's brother have to worry, who's my daughter going to marry? Was it going to be a good family? Is the guy going to take care of her? And so on. And if his own brother says, I will marry your daughter, I'll take care of her, and he knows that it's a good family, so then this is doing your brother a favor. We don't practice this now because it's very close, but in the olden days, this in rabbinic circles, this was permitted and even encouraged. Although, incidentally, the Dead Sea sect says that this is prohibited, because they say, just like the Torah says, a man can't marry his aunt. This is the same thing. A man and his aunt, or a woman and her uncle, that's the same relationship. So they actually make a derivation, whereas in this case, the rabbis read the Torah peshat, only what it says, only an aunt is prohibited, but a woman and her uncle is permitted, and that's the Dead Sea sect. Usually they take a more literal interpretation, but here they're the ones that add another law to the simple reading of the Torah. All that, and someone who lends a coin to a poor person when he needs it. Regarding all these people, the pasuk says, if you cry out, then Hashem will answer. So Hashem will say, yes, I am here to answer all those who do these nice things. Tenor banan, oto ve'eten, oto ve'et achat mehen. Okay, this we saw the sugya already yesterday, so let's review it. The pasuk says if a man takes a woman and her mother, right, his wife and his mother-in-law, this is not good, this is zima, and you will burn oto, him, the man who sins. And then it says curiously eten, plural. It should have said ota, because if it's with his wife and his mother-in-law, his wife is permitted to him, so his wife is not going to get punished for anything. But rather, the problem is that after he's married and he's with his wife, then he's with his mother-in-law. That's a problem. So it should be that he gets burning, he gets serefa, and his mother-in-law gets serefa. Should be ota. Why is it plural? Two opinions. Rabbi Ishmael says that oto and achat mehen doesn't mean both of them, but rather one of them. We'll see what he means. And Rabbi Akiva says, oto v'shitehen, him and both of them. So what my benayu? What are they arguing about? Amar Abaye mashmuto shimika benayu. There's a machloket amoraim about this machloket tanaim. Abaye says they agree on the bottom line law. They just disagree about what's derived from this pasuk. Rabbi Ishmael sabad oto ve'eten, oto ve'et achat mehen sheken b'lashon yavani korin le'achat hena. Rabbi Ishmael says when it says oto ve'eten, it doesn't mean actually both of them. It means him and one of them. Because in Greek, you say one, hena, one. And so eten means one of them. And therefore, you don't in fact kill them both, but rather, if a man is with his wife and his wife's mother, you kill him and you kill her, the mother-in-law, but not the wife. Now, how would you know that a man is not allowed to be with his grandmother-in-law, em chamoto, his mother-in-law's mother? That is from a different derasha, not from this pasuk, not from the word eten. Rabbi Akiva sabar oto ve'eten, oto ve'shitehen, ve'em chamoto hachaketiba. Rabbi Akiva, however, says you kill him, and yes, both of them, because the both of them is not referring to his wife, but rather his mother-in-law and his grandmother-in-law. And so if a man is married to a certain woman, and then he sins with either his mother-in-law and or his grandmother-in-law, if either one of them, he and she will be killed. If he sins with his mother-in-law and grandmother-in-law, then both of them are killed. So it's talking about two people that are included in this prohibition, two women, and they both are deserving of the death penalty if they sin with that man. Okay, so that's all according to Abaye. And by bottom line, they all agree that a grandmother-in-law is prohibited. It's just a question of do you derive it from here or not from here. Rava amar chamoto lachar mitaika benaihu. Rava says no. The machloket here between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ishmael is about a mother-in-law after the death of one's wife. Rabbi Ishmael sabar chamoto lachar mita bisrefa. Rabbi Ishmael says his mother-in-law is prohibited always, all the time, even after his wife dies. And then he's with his mother-in-law, still he gets serefa and she gets serefa. How does he know that? Because he reads it, and one of them, meaning even if only one of them is alive. Well, if his mother-in-law dies, then of course he could still be with his wife. There's no law there. But rather it's talking about if his wife dies and only his mother-in-law is alive. That's what it means. And one of them, still serefa. Rabbi Akiva savar isura be'alma. Rabbi Akiva says no. It says shetehen. That means there's only prohibition if both of them are alive, his wife and his mother-in-law. But if his wife dies, then the prohibition to be with his mother-in-law is only a lav, is a mere negative prohibition, but without a punishment of the death penalty. Next, we begin the next Mishnah. Ve'elu haneheragin harosech ve'enshe ir hanidachat. The next form of capital punishment is decapitation, hereg. And the people who deserve that is a murderer and the people in an idolatrous city. If the whole city turns to idolatry, then we bring the army and kill them by sword. So that's called cherev, or decapitation, hereg. Roseach sheikadrehu be'even o be'barzel v'chabash alav letoch hamayim o letoch ha'ur ve'no yachol la'alot misham vamet hayav. Murder includes the following things, not just stabbing someone, but also if you hit someone with a stone or a piece of iron, or if you hold them underwater. This would include not only if you throw them into the water. Let's say the person is also already in the water. They're swimming. They go for a dunk, and then I just go and I hold them underwater. I didn't put them underwater. I'm just holding them there. That's also murder. Or if I keep them in the fire, and they cannot get out of there, so I hold them there such that they cannot get out, and the person dies. Then I am liable to murder. However, dechafo letoch hamayim or letoch ha'ur ve'achol la'alot misham v'amet patur. If I push someone into the water or I push him into a fire and he can get out, and for some reason he doesn't get out, then I am not liable, even though I'm the one that put him in the water or put him in the fire. Since he could get out, so I'm not responsible. Some other cause made him not be able to get out, whatever it is. On the other hand, if I didn't put him in the water, he went in the water by himself, but I keep him down in there, or he went into a fire and I keep him in there, then I am liable. Shisa bo ata kelev, shisa bo ata nachash patur. Hishich bo ata nachash biyuda mechayev chamim potrin. If I set a dog against someone or a snake against someone and it goes and bites him and he dies, I am not liable, even though I'm somewhat responsible, but it's too indirect. It's a dog that went and killed him, so it's not a good thing to do, but I wouldn't be liable to capital punishment. If I take a snake and actually put the fangs of the snake into someone, that's more direct than the previous cases. So therefore the Biuda says that's like actual murder, that's like same as stabbing a person to death. And Chamim say, no, patur, even that case is indirect. It's true, I put the fangs in, but maybe he could have found an antidote, or maybe something else would have happened. It's not me directly that's causing him to die, but rather the course of nature of what happens as a result of that. So that's too indirect according to Chachamim. Now the Gemara, Amar Shemuel, mipnei ma lo ne'emra yad bebarzel. How come the Pesukim regarding murder don't say the word yad when it comes to a piece of metal? Here's the Pesukim that's referring to. It says, Im bechli barzel, if a person hits someone else, hikahu vayamot roseachu mot yumat haroseach. If someone hits someone else with an instrument of iron, a kli barzel, instrument of iron, and he dies, this person is a murderer, and you put him to death. That's case one. It doesn't say the word yad here. But the next two cases, it does say yad and yad. Im be'im be'even yad asher yamut ba hikahu vayamot roseachu mot yumat haroseach. If he smites him by hand with a stone and he dies, then he's a murderer. Or bechli etz yad asher yamut bo hikahu vayamot roseachu. Or he smites him with a hand weapon of wood and he dies, he's a murderer. So how come regarding stone and wood it says the word yad, but for barzel it does not say the word yad? Good question. And the answer is shabarzel memit bekol shehu, because iron can kill even with a small size. It doesn't have to be the size of a hand. Whereas the other two, a stone, a tiny pebble is not going to kill someone if you hit someone with it, or a small piece of wood, but only if it's a big block. Then if you hit someone on the head, then you'll kill them. However, when it comes to iron, because you can make a knife out of it and it's sharp, even if it's a small spike, that can stab someone. Tanya nami hachi. Rabbi Omer. Galu v'yadu l'fnei mi shamar v'ha'olam shabarzeh memit b'kol shu lefichach lo natena Torah bo shiur. V'hanemile dibrazeh mibraz. We have a baraita that supports this answer that we said for Shemuel. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi says it is known before he who spoke and created the world, that iron can kill someone even if it's a small amount, and therefore the Torah did not give a size limit. Whereas for other items like wood, it's hard to make a spike out of wood or out of stone. So therefore, in those cases, if it's just a small thing and I hit someone on the head with it and he dies, I'm not a murderer, because that's shogeg. Like, how did he die? It was just a little pebble that I threw at him. It doesn't make sense. It only makes sense. I'm only liable if I hit him with something that is normally capable of killing. And that's why it says yad. Whereas for a piece of metal, it doesn't say yad, because even a small amount can kill someone. However, that's only if he stabs him. If the guy dies from a stabbing wound, from a small amount of metal, then I am liable. However, if it's not from a stabbing wound, if I take a small chunk of metal and just hit him with it, but doesn't cause a stab, then that would in fact be the same as the stone. Whereas it's from the blow, it has to be from the weight and size of the item, and if the guy dies by a blow, it has to be a sizable item that is expected to cause death. But if it's by stabbing, then even a small amount of metal, one would be liable to capital punishment. Baruch Adonai Le'olam, Amen ve'amen.